Dear Alexander Sholokov, dear colleagues, dear friends, you can't believe my pleasure to welcome you all, wherever you are, as participants of our conference, Let's Talk, Reimagine Visitor Journey. In the world of ICOM, it is always a great thing if there is a collaboration between a national committee and an international committee. But since 2014, there is a fruitful partnership between ICOM Germany and ICOM Russia because of the great conference, Museum and Politics, which took place in St. Petersburg. Again, dear Alexander, it is a great pleasure that ICOM Russia is our partner for our annual conference. Money keeps the world going, even the museum world. Dear Roman Davidov, you and your fantastic International Numismatic Club is host of our conference. We are incredibly grateful for the opportunity to be guest at your impressive museum. And we have a special guest. Thanks to Marina Loshka, the director of the Pushkin State Museum of Fine Arts. Through the initiative of Evgenia Kiseleva, it is possible to get the Pushkin Museum as a special guest. Sometimes we have to stand alone, but it's great fun to have a fantastic organizing committee. Olga Kristanova, Executive Director of ICOM Russia, and Afanasy Gnedovsky, member of ICOM Russia. And of course, Tamara, Anastasia, and Björn. Thank you very much for doing such a great job together. And of course, we have to thank you, our audience. It's great that you followed our invitation. Oops, I think I forgot a crucial person. Without all speakers and contributors, a conference would just be a self-talk. Let's get into the topic. Let us have a closer look on our conference title. Let's Talk, Reimagine Visitor Journey. Let's stands for a call for action. Talk stands for a way to communicate. That means our core competence as NPR people. Reimagine stands for breaking old borders, rethink the whole process. Visitor stands for people who use the museum in some ways. And last but not least, journey stands for a new perspective on the museum visit. That makes clear that we are touching on many of the points in the current museum debate. What about the keywords of the discussion? Of course, the pandemic situation, digitalization, and social changes, migration, change of values, and lifelong learning. Climate change, provenance research and decolonization of the museum, and last but not least, museum definition, just to name some of them. Especially the last point, museum definition, makes clear that we have to rethink and reimagine our own role as communicators of museums. And the keyword visitor journey makes clear that we have to cooperate with the colleagues inside and outside the museum. I think we all agree that the museum is first and foremost there for the people. To be precise, it has the purpose of informing people about cultural, artistical, technological, natural historical, or historical processes and developments. The museum has the obligation to enable people to better understand their own position, their own situation, and to put it into a historical or social context. Let's say the museum itself must become a learning institution. That gives rise to a kind of dichotomy. The museum needs a closeness and awareness of its own objects, knowledge, and data holdings. And at the same moment, the museum needs to establish a relation with its potential visitors. The situation is complicated by the fact that, an example, climate change requires new aspects to be taken into account that have not yet been considered. Just think of the setup work for special exhibitions or the high expenditures by the lone traffic. And last but not least, remember the traffic jam in touristic hotspots. Holistic viewpoint. I think that right now museums should develop a completely new understanding of sustainability. Until now, sustainability has only been understood as a combination of three components: the social, the economic, and the ecological, which overlaps to create three intersections: fairness, worthiness of life, and reasonable. That's not wrong, but in my opinion, it is not enough for the upcoming challenges we are going to face. Only when we embed this existing system in a cultural, or let's say artistic historical layer, a really sustainable and valuable foundation can emerge. It is precisely this new interface that museums could make their own socially productive contribution. They could place their intercultural, historical, contemporary skills in a new context, and thus vividly signals their local, regional, or super-regional cultural political system relevance by actively demonstrating their willingness and ability to engage in discourses. Visitor journey. Visitor journey, that means the curation of the museum visit has to be completely rethought, planned, and initiated. It's about conceptually interweaving the analog and the digital. Only through this approach, a real added value arises, both for the perspective of the museums, that's museum tasks, and from the perspective of the visitors, that's the visitor needs. The museum visit no longer begins at the ticket desk, but rather on the couch at home. And in times of COVID-19, it is important to enable a digital visitor journey too. From a classic marketing perspective, it's simply a matter of formulating a brand promise, customer satisfaction, and customer loyalty. It is important not only to incite longings or interests in the potential target groups, but also to fully meet their expectations. I think we should really design a totally new visitor journey. In my mind, the visitor 1.0 is dead, because we have to take care about different areas and different kinds of visits. I differ between on-site and off-site, and on-site and online. And when you look at the graph, you can see there are visitors, there are users, there are surfers, followers, and contributors. And the great advantage of such a bird view on the topic visitor journey is that you can analyze all the touch points, how to meet and where to meet the potential visitors in the future. These 4 different levels, which of course overlaps, should be connected to one another, if possible, without media disruptions. Ideally, the visitor journey is designed in such a way that the informational thread between the guest and the museum never breaks. Therefore, museum should pay more attention to the topic of customer loyalty in the future. In the future, audience development and visitor relation management will take place simultaneously in these 4 levels. When we talk about strategy in museums, we should always keep in mind that it is about developing a holistic strategy. In order to be able to begin such a process, a mental openness within the museum is primarily required. Through a collaborative way of working, the potential of the different skills and perspectives could be used for exhibitions and program work. In the next step, the interface to the audience can be institutionalized. It is about creating a dialogue on eye level. Increasing knowledge of the visitor needs and the museum tasks would result in a much greater mutual understanding. The diagram clearly shows how additional power can be gained from this multi-layered overlaps. Social sculpture. Despite of all urgency that overcoming the current pandemic demands of us, at this point, we should allow ourselves to reflect in order to systematically develop a truly cultural and sustainable profile of the museums that should be configured in the new normal. This would bring us very close to Joseph Beuys' concept of the expanded concept of art. The museum would become a form of a social sculpture to which each of us would be able to contribute.